Hello and welcome to the Antiquarian Outlook for the 8th week of 2025, starting February 17th. I'm Spencer W. Stuart, Collections Advisor, author of Contemporary Issues in Rare Books and Manuscript Collecting, and host of the monthly webinar Collecting Insights. For more details on my services, publications, and programs, follow the links below. But for now, let's get started with last week's results. Monday saw the first session of the Kedem auction house based in Israel. There were 35 lots that were offered and 34 were sold, which made for a 97% sell-through rate. The overall amount that they made through the sale was about $1 million, and there was an expected earning of $982,000 to $1.3 million. The highest price realized on the day was Lot 10, a Passover Haggadah, which had an estimate of $200,000 to $250,000 US dollars, and ultimately realized $250,000 on the day. A buy-in of note from the day was Lot 22, which was a decorated parchment ketubah created in 1777. The estimate that was set up was $18,000 to $25,000 US, however there was very little interest in bidding. A runaway lot from the sale was the first lot, which was a large hand-colored woodcut depicting holy sites and grave sites in and around Israel, created in Italy in the 17th century. The estimate for this was $20,000 to $30,000. However, there was active bidding, and it realized $50,000 on the day. Tuesday was host to a sale from New England Book Auctions. It was mostly focusing on literature and children's literature. There were 208 lots in the sale, of which 177 sold, making about 85% sell-through rate. Overall amount made through the sale was about $51,000 of an expected $41,930 to $62,995. The highest value item on the day was Lot 30A, which was a Robert Burns book, The Poetic Works of Robert Burns with His Life. However, what really drove the value on this item was some inserted manuscript material. The estimates for it was $6,000 to $9,000 US, and it ultimately realized $6,200 on the day. A couple lots that performed beyond expectation. The first was Lot 40, which was 32 volumes of the children's serial. It started at 80 to 120 as an estimate, and ultimately realized $780 on the day. The other one was Lot 53, which was Patterson's Mammy Lou's Cookbook in first edition from 1931, also with an estimate of 80 to 120, realizing 270. Returning to Kedem Auction House, they had a second session on the Tuesday, which was a larger sale, seeing 300 items, of which 233 sold, making a sell-through rate of 74%. The amount that was raised on the day was roughly $339,000 US. The highest price realized on the day was for Lot 38, which was an Esther scroll decorated in engravings made in Amsterdam in the 18th century. The bidding started at $2,000 US and ultimately reached $11,875 US. Something that was surprising from the sale was a variety of different group lots which had very active bidding. The two examples here, Lot 116, which was about 50 books, all related to Judaica, mostly of Hasidic and Kabbalistic books, which started its bidding at $500 US, ultimately realizing $3,600, and Lot 126, which was also an assortment of about 160 books, similarly around the history of the Jewish religion, in which it started its bidding at about $1,000 US, ultimately realizing $8,125. Moving on to Wednesday, Trafford Books had a sale of about 186 lots, of which 149 sold, making for an 80% sell-through rate. It ultimately realized £11,927 of a potential amount raised through the sale of £11,563 through to £16,815. The highest price realized on the day was for Lot 27, which was a book on Churchill, The Man of the Century, published in 1955, signed by Winston Churchill, also including a letter from his private secretary to confirm that he was indeed signing this book. The estimate here was £700 to £1,000, realizing £644. There were not a lot of items in this sale that actually overperformed, but one that was noteworthy was Lot 36, David Hockney, by David Hockney, which was published in 1976. It was signed by David Hockney, and the estimate here was £150 to £200, ultimately realizing £333. This is impressive because to acquire a similar copy through the trade would be about £1,600 at time of recording. Thursday, Purcell Auctioneers in Ireland had a rather large sale, included 627 items, of which 534 sold, making for an 85% sell-through rate. This ultimately raised €52,000 of a potential 46,000 through to 76 to 60. The highest price realized on the day was for Lot 409, an interesting collection of Router's news telegrams that circulate roughly around various rebellions that were taking place in 1916 in Dublin and in Ireland. The estimates started at €500 to €800, ultimately realizing €1,187. One item that performed beyond expectation was Lot 55, Evelyn Philip Shirley's The History of the County of Monaghan, published in 1879, of which was inscribed to William Birmingham from the author herself. The estimate here was €300 to €500, ultimately realizing €1,100. A lot of the buy-ins from this sale were to do with Irish language material. Still on Thursday, Forum Auctions had the sale 22025, of which there were 309 lots, of which 287 sold, making for a sell-through rate of 92.8%. They raised through the sale £168,480. The potential range for the sales profit was £80,540 through to £113,000. The highest result on the day was Lot 307, a John Wyndham first edition, which was a presentation copy. The estimation on this was £600 to £800, and it ultimately reached £5,769. Notable to this sale were a number of buy-ins of modern literature, an interesting trend to note. In looking at this sale, it was really the story of two authors. The first being John Wyndham, again here, Lot 309, which well outpaced its estimates, £300 to £400, realizing £4,600, and also a really strong amount of material from Angela Carter. One notable lot being 148, which was correspondence and related material connected with her close friend and collaborator, Karina Sargood. The estimates for this were set at £600 to £800, but ultimately realized £3,200 on the day. Still with Thursday, PBA had the sale 832, of which they had 528 lots, 408 sold, making for a 77% sell-through rate. They raised $184,834 on the day. They expected to raise between $224,700 through to $354,500. The highest result on the day was for Franklin Dixon's The Hardy Boys' The Tower Treasure, published in 1927. The estimates on this were set at $8,000 to $12,000. It realized $6,875. A notable lot on the day was Lot 35, a first edition copy of Joan Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. The estimates set on this were $300 to $500, and it ultimately realized $1,500. A number of the buy-ins on the day were related to beat material as well as Charles Bukowski material that were offered. Another notable item from the PBA sale was Lot 287, which were original typescripts connected to Ray Bradbury's Night Call Collect. The estimates set on this were 700 to 1,000. It ultimately realized 2,812 on the day. Coming into week 9, these are some of the sales that we have our eye on. Monday, Gorringes in East Essex, UK. Tuesday, Il Ponte in Milan. Again in Milan, Il Ponte will have a second day of sales. Still with Wednesday, Paris with Ader. Aguttes will also have an interesting sale on the day. Tooveys in UK. And staying with the UK, Hansons on Wednesday. Thursday, Forum Auction will have an online sale, as well as Freeman's Hindman will have an online sale with some previews in Cincinnati. Chiswick in London. And finally, Giquello in Paris. Giquello will continue its sale on Friday. And finally, Ader will have an online sale. News for the week. John Rylands Library in Manchester has just announced a major new exhibition. So if you find yourself there in May 2025, be sure to stop by The Secret Public, LGBTQ Pop 1955 to 1985, curated by John Savage. Continuing with libraries and archives, the New York Public Library is scheduled to open Joan Didion as well as John Gregory Dunn's archives March 26, 2025. Make sure to check out the Antiquarian Bookseller Association of America's February catalogs. Also an announcement of note, a call for submissions for the Honey and Wax Collecting Prize. Be sure to follow the links down below to find more information on that. In the news of collection placements, a considerable collection of John A. Lindseth has now been placed at Oxford College, specifically Christ Church, of his Lewis Carroll collection. And finally, the director of Game of Thrones has just donated scripts, storyboards, and other related material to Toronto Metropolitan University's library. Well, that's been the week from here. What did you think of last week's results? What surprised you? Be sure to put some comments below, and we'll keep the conversation going. Again, for more details on my services, publications, and programs, please follow the links below. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to stay in touch, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. All for now, and see you next week.